So you've mentioned there that there's still issues ongoing with the way the NRA is run, even during your time on the board after many of the main allegations from this case had taken place. What they've also had issues with retaining directors and officers insurance, which provides
Right.
liability coverage for people who are on boards like the NRA board and make decisions for how the group can be run or should be run, because they have a fiduciary responsibility, which means they could be sued personally over how some of these decisions play out. And that's what D&O insurance is meant to protect against, and just in case there is a lawsuit like that. Given, at least in your view, that they're still making a lot of decisions that are not correct or could be questioned in court at a later time, how has the board reacted to the loss of their D&O insurance? What kind of risks do you believe, as somebody who was on the board, are associated with serving on this board today or in the last couple of years? And how's the rest of the board view those risks?
Okay, it's unfortunate that I don't think that the board members fully understand their role as a fiduciary, and they don't understand what D&O insurance really is and why it's so important. The board has been kind of quiet about the whole issue. The insurance carrier, which was Lloyd's of London, was the D&O insurance provider for the NRA. They dropped the NRA because the risk was too high. So they just dropped the NRA as a customer. The NRA went out, and initially they said they were going to do a kind of a self-insurance. They were going to set aside monies that could be used for possible D&O coverage. Well, I don't think that ever came to any type of fruition. Then they went out and pieced together several insurance carriers to get a very expensive D&O policy. There's several problems with that. The first one is the D&O policy has still not been provided to the board. I requested that from the NRA, and they refused to give it to me. I even got an attorney involved to try to force them to give me a copy as a director, and so I could see that. They wouldn't provide it.
What did they say for why they wouldn't provide it?
Well, they said it's confidential. They said it was confidential information. And I said, I'm a director. You can't keep the policy that's supposed to cover me confidential for me, And so they just said, well, we're not going to release that. And I actually did see it recently. I think the Russian hackers posted it on a website that I read, and I was able to finally read it for the very first time. But the problem with the policy. It only starts this year. Anything that has occurred prior to this policy is not covered. So if there was any kind of fiduciary failing by the board prior to this policy starting, there is no coverage. And I don't think they understand that. And if I was serving on the board in those difficult years, prior to 2020, I think there's some financial exposure there that they could be at risk. And I don't think they appreciate that.
Right. And so I guess, what do you view as the exposure? I guess, take, for instance, the bankruptcy filing. That cost the organization tens of millions of dollars to do. It was unsuccessful. It was widely viewed to be a Hail Mary move that didn't have much chance of success. Could the board members be sued personally if, for instance, current leadership is no longer in charge of the NRA? Because wouldn't the NRA have to sue? They'd be the party that was, affected by these poor decisions, right? So I guess, can you explain a little bit of how you view these board members being personally liable, and maybe use the bankruptcy as an example?
Yeah. So let's assume that the courts find that these accusations are all true. Well, at that point, the New York AG can try to claw back all of the monies that were spent in let's say a fraudulent manner, or spent in a way that was inappropriate or illegal. So the New York AG can try to claw back those monies. Also, individual lawsuits can be filed against board of director members and make them personally liable for those funds, because the board is the oversight. That's why the board is so important. It's the governing body to make sure that your management and the board is operating within the law. If you violate that and you knowingly violate those responsibilities or ignore your responsibilities as a fiduciary, and claiming ignorance is not a valid claim. You can't claim I didn't know, or the whole position of being on the board of directors is you either know or you should have known. There is no, well, I didn't know, therefore I'm not liable. No, you're liable. When you accept to be on this board, you are liable. That's why you need D&O insurance to protect you. Since they don't have D&O insurance policies, then the board members could be sued individually for whatever claims that may be out there for the misuse of the monies.
And I guess in your mind, something like the bankruptcy, where effectively that was decided without any input from the board members, but the board members later went back and retroactively approved it. And then even, I think, was it probably a third of the board didn't even show up to that meeting or vote on the
Correct.
resolution.
Correct.
Those people have perhaps significant exposure for that decision. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think, well, it's for not only that decision, but really for lots of decisions. So, I mean, even if you go way back, I mean, a lot of the board members that are still there approved a lot of the transactions that occurred that are now showing up in this lawsuit. So, things like contracts for, individuals, contracts for board members, contracts for officers and family members of officers, all that has some of that process through the boards, especially through the committees, like the audit committee. There's some personal liability there, and it'd be interesting to see what happens moving forward, because I'm hoping that those monies that were misspent or misused, that the NRA has an opportunity to get those back, and the board of directors may have some liability there for sure.
Interesting. All right, so you're no longer on the board, and
Correct.
The intervention that you attempted in New York has failed. So what do you view as your role moving forward in this effort to reform the NRA?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to get involved with the members and try to be a voice to just kind of continue to point out the problems that exist with the NRA, and hopefully, if the members will rise up and take back their NRA, maybe there's an opportunity that we can solve some of these problems. So I'm going to try to be a voice in that regard, and hope that we can change it going forward.